Walter Riley.
And Walter, you were one of the participants, the organizers of the San Francisco State Strike. How did you come to get involved in the San Francisco State Strike?
I came to San Francisco in January of '65 from the South. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and I had been a civil rights organizer. I got active in the civil rights movement in my adolescent years. I was an organizer of the sit-in movement, voter registration campaigns, jobs campaigns in North Carolina, and traveling. I was a field secretary for CORE, and before that I had been an organizer statewide for the NAACP in North Carolina and leader of the local movement. So when I came out here because I'd heard about the $48. I read it in a magazine to go to school for a year. I got married when I was in high school, and my wife was a freedom rider, and she was from San Francisco, so this was a logical place to go for us. I couldn't find work. I came to San Francisco, got a job, and working for the telephone company, and decided I'd go to San Francisco State. I come over here, and I met people who were involved in the political movement.
Okay,
A member of CORE still. I had come directly from being the field secretary to San Francisco with my wife and child at the time in 1965. So I was still connected to CORE. I was connected in that sense to what was going on in the community, but needing and wanting to get an education is what I was about in that period. So enrolled in San Francisco State. I met people who were politically active. I met people who were engaged in struggle on the campus around the war, around the idea of admissions of black students. And having done some of that organizing and been an organizer in the South, this was right up my line.
So you were a seasoned organizer?
I was. By that time, I consider myself a veteran organizer, having done everything from training, from nonviolent training to dealing with violence in the movement, to organizing voter registration campaigns, to organizing jobs campaigns, negotiating, developing programmatic approaches, to organizing, developing NAACP chapters, organizing chapters around the Southeast region. In CORE, my region was the Southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia area. So I was somebody who had knocked on doors, somebody who talked to people, somebody who had led small groups of discussions about how do you get more people involved, how do you get people active, working with both high school, college students, and adults. The chapter that I led included everybody from 12 to 35 years old.
And what was your involvement in the union? The trade union movement in San Francisco ended up supporting the strike, the San Francisco Labor Council. What was going on in the unions at that time?
Well, when I was an organizer in the South, I worked with COPE, political organizing. As a civil rights organizer, we did work together around hospital work. We did organizing as labor. My father was a construction worker after he was farming, or at the same time. So we did a lot of union activities, working in tobacco and organizing. Out here, I saw the power of labor coalescing with the movement, and having had some of that experience, I thought it was absolutely necessary. When I was at San Francisco State, I was also working. So I worked full-time, went to school full-time. I was a full-time day student. But as a full-time employee, I was very much involved with the union. In the later part of the strike, I was a bus driver, San Francisco Community bus driver. And as a bus driver, we organized a rank and file caucus. I was a leader in putting together a black caucus at the San Francisco.
I mean, there was segregation at that time against bus drivers. Is that something you organized against, the African American bus drivers?
Well, it was well, in the late 60s, the late 50s, there became more of an effort to have more and more black bus drivers because of the war, the elimination of a lot of men being able to work. So women had gotten involved, and a lot of women who were driving the buses were actually black women in San Francisco. So they played a tremendous role in I guess, humanizing the work, making more of a connection between the work and the community they were involved with. But by the time I got involved as a bus driver at San Francisco Muni, we organized a caucus in order to raise issues around working conditions, the relationship of bus drivers and the union, to the community. We took part in support for many kinds of activities, strikes, because of the contract that we had. San Francisco bus drivers got the difference between the two best unions in the country. That was at that time New York, which was led by Mike Quill, who was a fantastic political organizer and leftist, a Communist Party member, and Atlanta. So we didn't have to strike for wages, but we did have to work for working conditions, and we had political consciousness. So we had in the union Panther members, we had other labor activists, we had people who were strictly, class conscious folks. And I brought that to my own experience here. I became a member of the BSU, I became a member of the SDS, I worked to run for student government, I worked to raise these political issues as a student when I was on campus. And that was part of my involvement in the strike movement, was raising and discussing these political issues, that if we couldn't relate to the community in the strike and the strike demands and what we hoped to be the outcomes, it was going to be for naught. The fight against the draft, the fight against the war, the fight against ROTC, all had to have that concept of us as people, as members of the community. Because otherwise, all of these movements serve a class that doesn't benefit us. If we can't serve our own class, identify who we are, identify our role in a movement and be part of the people, then we will only develop an educational system or an organizational infrastructure that would serve more oppressive forces. That's one of the issues I think that exists today. What are students learning? They're learning to be NGO operators. They're learning, those who don't want to become part of the oppressive system, they are learning the neoliberal approach, analysis about what happens in the world, and austerity programs or educational programs that not benefit large numbers of people. These are many of the political kinds of ideas, I think, that are absolutely critical for us to survive in this country and our relationships to the rest of the world. My experience in the strike movement was to see us as part of an international movement. Having been in the civil rights movement and wanted to understand what other countries were doing in relation to our movement, at the time I became more conscious of what could happen when students in other parts of the world, young people in other parts of the world, or workers in other parts of the world understood who we were in the civil rights movement down south, giving us recognition, giving us support, giving us help, in some sense raising us up as people who were engaged in valuable struggle for our own humanity. Seeing that as a student, I thought that was very important. And it wasn't an easy struggle, because not everybody who came to the campus had that political outlook. And for me, it was a struggle with a lot of the people who were active in the movement, who understood their role in the movement for, in some sense, being self-serving, being wanting to get what they needed, that was important, but not always understanding the relationships between us as students and the other parts of the world. When I came here, we were having the discussions around the Muslims. We were having discussions around Nation of Islam, discussions around Malcolm X. I had known Malcolm X in the South. I had worked with Malcolm X to some extent, and particularly was more conscious of Malcolm X during that period when he was playing various roles in the world and is simply developing a world outlook. So that was what I was involved with as a student, and as a member of the BSU. As a member of the student movement working in SDS, I wanted to develop the concept of a unity between students, world outlook, and an idea that what we were engaged in was a class struggle. The members of the middle class that did not understand the role of students, didn't understand the role of workers, didn't understand the power of unions, needed to be confronted. We had to confront that in the civil rights movement in the South. That was very much a part of every struggle we had. Sometimes that's not focused on today, but those internal struggles is what made our movement strong, and our losses around them are what made our movements weak. Our lack of development sometimes has to do with our lack of class clarity. Who we are, where we are, what we're going to do, and what do we serve with our actions. Who do we serve with our ideas? What is education? What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of us organizing as workers?